Hello and welcome to the Conscious Craft Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make the classic crochet bag. You will need 19 crochet squares. These can be any type of crochet square. I'm using flower crochet squares. I will show you how to make these in a video called How to Crochet a Flower Square. I will put the link to this video in the info section for this video. The squares can of course be any colour, so this is great for those of you who want to pair it up with a special outfit. Each of my squares are just over 4 inches square. I made them using 2 balls of 120 grams. Each ball of wool was 225 metres long. In addition to the wool, you will need a pair of handles. I bought mine from Amazon. You will also need a crochet hook. I used the 4.5mm crochet hook, and you'll also need a darning needle for stitching up the bag if you don't join the squares as you make them. Now let's begin. The first task is to sew together the 16 crochet squares. You make a long rectangle which will be 2 squares by 8 squares. These will be the 4 sides of the bag, the 2 large sides which will be 6 by 2 and the 2 short sides which will be 1 by 2. You will then need to join the long rectangle together so you have a large tube. If you are using different coloured squares, please work out which squares you will want to appear on the larger side of the bag and which you will want to appear on the short sides of the bag before you start sewing. Start with the front edges of the squares facing together. The front edges are the sides you want to appear on the outside of the bag. The best way to sew your crochet squares together is by catching the middle of the V's, which are on the edges of the crochet squares. You need to alternate from one square and then to the other. Once you have joined the squares you're joining, finish off the yarn at both ends by sewing into the crochet square as you normally would, going backwards and forwards 3 times, which will produce a secure end to the yarn you're using. Once you have got the tube of side squares all joined together, you need to crochet the top band of the bag. This is where the handles will be eventually connected to. You need to put 1 double crochet into each gap below each V and 2 into the gaps that are in the corner spaces. You need to crochet around the top of the bag at least 4 times so you have enough space for you to be able to sew on your handles. The next thing we need to do is measure the bag for the lining. We will end up needing a length of fabric which is 37 inches by 11. We're including 2 inches for the seam allowance. And for the base we need a square which is 15 by 6.5. Noting that we add 2 inches to both lengths for the seam allowance. So we'll sew together the 37 by 11 and the 15 by 6.5, which will be the oblong for the base. You can either do this on a sewing machine or by hand. The next thing we need to do is pin the lining to the bag so that we know that everything fits correctly. The best thing to do is to fold in the 2 short sides . The lining that I have made has just got 1 seam along the side. This I will put against the side edge so the seam appears in the middle of the bag. Remember to have the bag the right way round so that the good side is on the inside. And now we'll start to pin. So where the seam is, I'll put it in the centre of the short side of the bag. It's best to pin at the bottom as well, so you're 100% sure that everything fits. And then pull the bag in half so that you get an exact half, so you can connect that to the other short side of the bag. You then need to carry on round the top of the bag, pinning in and just making sure that you're 100% certain with how the lining fits onto the outer case of the bag. Once you're happy, we're ready to sew. You can sew the lining in using a simple running stitch. I have used the back stitch, which gives you a complete line of stitches rather than the dashes of a running stitch. This stitch is completely up to you. You just need to ensure that you connect the lining to the outer case of the bag securely. Once you have sewn in your lining, you need to sew in the last 3 crochet squares which make up the base of your bag. You do this in exactly the same way as you sewed your side panel squares together, just catching the V's on the edges of each of the sides of the crochet squares. The last thing you need to do is to sew in your handles. The process will be different depending on which handles you have decided to use. Please be careful to mark where you want the handles to be attached so you don't make any mistakes and end up having to sew any of the handles on twice. The sewing process is quite self-explanatory. You just need to remember not to sew through to the outer layer with your stitches, or at least not where they can be seen. Keeping your stitches neat is important. However, securely attaching your handles is still the most important thing, for obvious reasons. Once your handles are sewn on, you have a completed bag. I hope you've enjoyed this process. This is a bag that should last you for a few years, and if you're inclined, you can make some more. So one for that special outfit, and one for every day. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel so you can join me with the Conscious Crafts Studio's next project. See you again soon.